So today I'm starting a new reading vlog. It's now August and August is Women in Translation Month, so I'm going to be trying to read as many books as I can by women that have been translated into English, basically. I have a few books that I'm carrying over from July. So I'm currently in the middle of The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater, which I'm actually really enjoying, and I wasn't sure I was going to like that one at all. I have maybe about 50 pages left of that one, so that'll be finished quite quickly. I'm reading The Garden Against Time by Olivia Lang. Again, really enjoying that one. That one's a non-fiction, all about the garden, and yeah, I'm really enjoying that, but reading it quite slowly because it's not dense, it's just not like something you can pick up and just read with no brain power. So I'm just kind of dipping in and out of that one. I think that's all I have on the go at the moment, so I can dedicate the rest of the month to reading Women in Translation. I'm not going to really set a TBR as such. I have two books that I would really like to get to from my physical shelf. So the first one is Holiday Heart by Margarita Garcia Raballo, and this is translated from Spanish by Charlotte Coombe. I've read Fish Soup by this author before and really loved it. That's like a short story collection, and I gave that one 5 stars. Really loved it, and I loved it so much that I pre-ordered this book, which came out probably, I want to say 2020, some time ago. 2020, and I didn't read it, and I put it on so many TBRs, particularly over summer, because it just strikes me as a real summary book that I'd like to read in the summer. I particularly like to read it this summer, not just because I've been putting it off for so long, but also because it's it can fit one of the prompts for Herkyard, which is to read a book sort of from every season set in that season. And I don't know if this is necessarily set in the summer, but it says Pablo and Lucia are Colombian immigrants who built their lives together in the US, yet maintain conflicting attitudes towards their homeland and the extent to which it defines their identity. After undergoing fertility treatment, Pablo finds himself excluded from raising their twins, and the new family situation seems to question the very nature of their relationship and of who they believed they were. In search of respite and time to reflect, Lucia takes the kids to her parents' apartment in Miami. Meanwhile, Pablo learns he is suffering from a syndrome known as Holiday Heart. But is this just a break, or is it really the final days of their marriage? And yeah, it doesn't seem particularly summery or particularly cheerful, but it's called Holiday Heart and it's set in a hot place, so I'm calling that summer because I'm from a cold place. So anything where the temperature is above about 15 degrees is summer to me, and yeah, we're gonna roll with that. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading that, and hope to get around to it this month. The other book that I really want to read is Kairos by Jenny Erpenbeck. This is a fiction book sort of set, it says a story of love and betrayal set in Berlin during the years before and after the fall of the wall. I don't really need to know any more than that. I know I love Jenny Erpenbeck's writing. I love like reading about that period in history. So yeah, I'm really excited to read that. And this is again another one that I bought in hardback. I bought it like 2 weeks before it came out in paperback, and was just like, I'm so desperate to read this, I need to buy it now. I can't wait 2 weeks. And I could have waited 2 weeks. I absolutely could have done, because I clearly haven't read it since, and this won the International Book Prize this year. So the other book I'm so excited to get to is an ebook. I have an ARC for this one. It is The Impusium by Olga Tokarczuk, and this is translated from Polish by Antonia Lloyd-Jones. I love Olga, one of my favourite authors, and I'm so excited to have got an ARC for this. It comes out in September, and it is a health resort horror story. So it's set in 1913, and it's kind of a riff off Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain with a like horror feminist lean to it. It seems quite similar to Drive Your Plough Over the Bones of the Dead, which I really love, so I'm excited to get to that one, and yeah, I'd like to read that in August because it comes out in September. There is another book I'd like to get to that isn't a book in translation. For Herkyard, I have to read a book that came out in every month in that month. So for July I read Queen Bee by Juno Dawson, and for August I need to do the same. So I'm thinking of picking up my Battle of Hastings. This is a non-fiction, it's a memoir, and the author moved to a small kind of rundown flat by the sea in Hastings in, I think it's over the winter of 2021, and it sort of chronicles Russia's invasion of Ukraine from her perspective living in the UK. It talks a lot about war and belonging and migration and sort of identity as a non-white person in the UK, and yeah, it just seems really interesting, so I'd be really keen to read that. I'm not sure if I'm going to pick up the physical copy because I've never read from this author before. I might maybe listen to it on audio if I can get hold of it. It's not on Script, unfortunately, which is a shame. My library doesn't have a copy of it, so yeah, I'll try and get to that one. There are some other books that I could read, I think, that are coming out in August, but this one is kind of the one that's jumping out to me at the moment, so it may change. I actually don't have an audiobook to read this month, and I always like to have an audiobook on the go just so I can read while I'm like washing dishes, tidying up and working. Sometimes if the book's not too in-depth, I can work and focus on a book at the same time. So yeah, I'd quite like to read Fauna. I know that's a collection of short stories. It's translated from French by a Canadian author, and it's like climate horror short stories, which sounds really interesting. I've had that on my TBR for a while now, and it's on Spotify, and I think it's only like 3 hours, so it doesn't really eat into my allowance that much. I'm trying to think what else I have by Women in Translation on my audio TBR. I have The Grey House, which is a potential, but I think the audiobook is about 35 hours long. It's like an 800-page book, and the premise of this sounds like it could go either way. It follows a group of children who are kind of kept in this school for children with physical disabilities, and I don't know much more than that about it, but I couldn't find any Own Voices reviews, and I don't know if the author is herself disabled. She's an Armenian author writing in Russian. I have sort of reservations about it. I think if it's done well, it could be done really well, but if it's done badly, it's going to be deeply offensive. I think disability as metaphor, you're sort of treading in quite dangerous territory in terms of how offensive that could be, so I'll listen to a little bit of it and see what I think, but yeah, it's fantasy, so I'm quite intrigued to read that. It seems like pretty old school fantasy. I think it came out in 2009. It was translated much more recently than that, but I'm thinking like kind of Inkheart kind of vibes is what I'm getting from it, even though the plot's not the same. I think it'll be a similar kind of fantasy. I think it is a YA, but I might be wrong about that, so don't quote me on it. But yeah, that's another potential. I don't think I have anything else on audio that is specifically Women in Translation or that I can think of that I would want to read, but that's quite a lot of books to be getting on with anyway. So I have a few on my Kindle as well. I have A Magical Girl Retires, which I'm really looking forward to reading, and yeah, I just have so many options that I could choose from, so we'll stick with that for now, and I'll let you know how I get on with these books as I read them. Who is she? I finished reading Fauna, and unfortunately this didn't really do anything for me. I read the first story and was just like, this writing is exquisite, it's really lush, and it just kind of evoked that like feeling of like plant life and heat, and just like a really like dense luscious rainforest. That's how I would describe it. But yeah, the actual stories themselves I just didn't get on with at all. In the first story we have quite a graphic rape scene, and I didn't think it was explored well at all. It made me feel uncomfortable, and yeah, the stories just didn't really do anything for me. They're kind of interconnected. We're following characters who appear throughout different stories, and they're kind of magical realism based. It's about bodies doing weird things. It's quite clearly about climate change, but yeah, I didn't really get a lot of the stories. Like, I didn't really understand what was happening a lot of the time. There's this one story about a woman who has basically, she's got this specimen and she's discovered a new life form, and she's trying to sort of garner as much information as she can to sort of present this to the world. She's also heavily pregnant, and she gets sort of trapped in the lab during a snowstorm and basically goes into labour sort of during this snowstorm. And I thought that story was really good. I really enjoyed that. It reminded me a lot of Seals by Naomi Booth. But yeah, all the other stories unfortunately just didn't really do anything for me, and I don't have anything to say about it. I just felt quite confused by what was going on. I found myself, like, because I was listening to it on audio, and I was just like really like just glazing over listening to it. So yeah, unfortunately this one was a bit of a flop for me. And the other book I finished was Holiday Heart by Margarita Garcia Raballo, and this is translated from Spanish by Charlotte Coombe. I read this in like 2 days, which is really rare for me. I know it's quite short, but like it's a piece of literary fiction without a huge amount of plot. And yeah, I just found myself really speeding through it. So in Holiday Heart we're following 2 deeply unlikable characters called Pablo and Lucia, and they have been married for quite some years and have children together, and their relationship is now over in everything but sort of like it being officially over, if you know what I mean. Like, the relationship is just unsalvageable at this point. Pablo has been having lots of affairs and is just behaving in a really awful way, and Lucia is also having affairs, and just like they clearly just hate each other. They utterly despise each other. There's such a build-up of resentment towards each other, towards their children, and this is just a catalogue really of how their relationship fell apart. So we open the novel with Lucia and the children have gone to stay with her parents. They have a holiday apartment in Miami, and Pablo has stayed at home. It's set sort of over the July the 4th celebrations. Pablo is at home recovering from a condition called Holiday Heart, which I don't think was really explained that well. So basically has like seemingly has a heart attack, and the doctor tells him he has this condition called Holiday Heart, where it's sort of associated with excess, so sort of like excessive fatty foods, just excessive alcohol, drugs, and just a promiscuous lifestyle. And they're just like, oh, you'll recover from that, it's just a temporary thing. But they put a stent in, and yeah, I just didn't really get that. I think maybe I was missing something there, but he's recovering from this illness. He's basically collapsed and is taken into hospital by one of his students. He's a high school teacher, and it's kind of assumed that he's been having this inappropriate relationship with a student who has taken him to the hospital. And for Lucia, that's kind of like the moment where she's like, I don't want to do this anymore, and takes the children to Miami. And that's the point where the relationship now is sort of deemed unsalvageable, despite it not being officially over. I think there's a really beautiful quote in this, which is actually on the back of the novel, and it's sort of Lucia reflecting on how the relationship has ended, and it says, "The strange thing is not the infidelity," thinks Lucia. "The really bizarre thing is to look at the other person and wonder who they are, what they're doing there next to you, when it was that their facial features changed so much. The accumulation of time makes strangers of us. Nobody can say precisely when the seed is planted." And it's really like talking about how there's no sort of one event that was like a catalyst to this relationship breaking down. So even though she's just had enough by the point where she believes that Pablo has been having this inappropriate relationship with a student, the relationship was over long before then, and I think the narrative really reflects that. So it's quite choppy in the sense that it's a dual perspective, so we're following Lucia, we're following Pablo, and we're sort of jumping around all over the place. So sometimes we'll be in Miami, sometimes we'll be with Pablo in his house while his children are away. Sometimes we'll be sort of like a little bit before the children were born, when the children were small, and it's just very all over the place and messy, and there's lots of different threads running through this, and you just can't really pick them apart a lot of the time, and it's just really reminiscent of just how this very complicated, messy relationship has just disintegrated. I really, really enjoyed that. It talks a lot about motherhood, so Lucia is in her 40s, and her children were conceived by IVF, and she's now sort of, although she loves her children, she's just like, did I actually want children? Was it the right decision to have them? Pablo is resentful of his children for a different reason, so he feels like he's now lost Lucia, and she's sort of dedicating her entire life to these children, and the children are very much hers and not his. He doesn't really feel like an active part of their life, I suppose. There's a lot of discussion about identity. So Pablo and Lucia are Colombian immigrants living in the US. I think they live in New Haven, and they have various family members sort of scattered about the place. So some are with them in the US, some have stayed in Colombia, and they both have very different ideas about what it means to be Colombian. So for Pablo, he is really insistent that he retains a physical connection with his homeland. So he likes to be back in Colombia and sort of wants the children to experience sort of their life in Colombia, and he really believes that to maintain this connection with Colombia he has to be there as well, whereas Lucia is very different, and she's just like quite happy to shun that aspect of her life, not necessarily shun being Colombian, but she's just like, I don't need to be there. Like, homeland is something that I carry sort of inside me, and I can sort of transplant that anywhere. So there's friction between them in terms of, you know, their ideas of identity and like raising their children. It talks a lot about class and racism. So Lucia and Pablo are brown people, brown Hispanic people, and they have sort of very deeply racist attitudes towards anybody who is darker than them. So there's a lot of racism towards black people, and that manifests itself in one of their children, who is only 6 years old and is sort of quite obviously parroting things that he's heard from either his parents or the family about black people. That's very offensive. They really look down on other, not just Colombian, but like other sort of South and Central American people who are working kind of as like the help. So they have a maid called Cindy, who is Cuban, I think, Cuban American, and is obviously from like a lower social class than Lucia, and Lucia just treats her horribly. So it's a really interesting exploration of how these people who are sort of subject to racism and classism themselves are sort of then perpetuating racism and classism against people who are darker than them and of lower classes than them. I thought that was really interesting. There is a scene which is a mild spoiler. While Lucia is on holiday, she is raped by a black man, and that made me really uncomfortable because I feel like maybe I missed something, maybe I missed the nuance. He was just this man who was just a very offensive, stereotypical, violent black man. I just didn't get why that was included when you're discussing racism. It just, like, that itself felt very racist to me, and yeah, I feel like maybe I've missed something there, I'm not sure, but I didn't like that. I thought overall the writing was good. It didn't capture me in the way that Fish Soup did, which is the first book I read by this author. I really loved that one, and this one didn't quite hit those heights for me. I really like reading about the breakdown of relationships. I think it's really interesting to read about that, particularly when there's not just like one sort of major catalyst for it, and it's just like a series of events and non-events as well that have led to it happening. I didn't think this offered anything particularly new. It wasn't particularly innovative in the way that I felt that Fish Soup was, but nevertheless I did enjoy it, and I gave it, I think, 3.5 stars. I would definitely read more from this author. I'm really interested in reading Delivery by her next. At this point I'm also about a third of the way through The Impusian by Olga Tokarczuk, and I'm enjoying it. It's quite dense in the way that Tokarczuk is. I feel like maybe I'm missing a lot of nuance because I don't know the Magic Mountain that this is based on. I've never read that, so I feel like maybe I'm missing something there, but yeah, I'm definitely intrigued and enjoying it. It's about a Polish man who goes to stay, or he's sent to a sanatorium in Germany, and the sanatorium is full, so he ends up staying at this guest house with other people who are waiting for their place in the sanatorium. And on the second day of him being there, the guest house owner, his wife, is found dead, and sort of the main character finds her body just on the table where they're eating. It's just been like placed there, and it is obviously quite disturbing to him, and he finds out that it's a suicide, although that is kind of a bit dubious, and there are people who think maybe it wasn't a suicide, or other people that think if it was, maybe her husband has driven her to it because he doesn't treat her very well. But it's a real critique of misogyny, just the way that all the men are talking about this woman who has just ended her own life is really awful. They're just like, oh well, it can't have been a suicide because women just aren't capable of having those kind of critical thoughts, and you know, they don't have basically thoughts of their own. She wouldn't have been able to act on it herself, and just like, they're just really awful towards women. And yeah, I don't really know what else to say. Like I said, I'm a third of the way through it. There's not really a huge amount of plot, but it's quite, it reminds me a lot of Drive for Flower Over the Bones of the Dead. If you like that, I think you will also like this one, just because there's like that sinister undertone, and it's a bit creepy and gothic, and you don't really know why you feel so like bleh, but you do. So yeah, I'll update you when I have finished reading that one. approaching the end of Women in Translation Month. It's the 28th of August today, and this is potentially my last update. I'm not sure yet. I just got back from London. I went with my partner and we went to see Death Cab for Cutie at the Postal Service at the All Points East Festival. It was amazing. I had such a good weekend. It made me really nostalgic, but also made me feel really quite old, because it was a celebration of the Postal Service. Their album came out 20 years ago, and the Death Cab for Cutie album, which also came out 20 years ago. And yeah, when you like that music the first time around, it's quite harrowing to realise that that was 20 years ago, because surely 20 years ago was like 1980 and I wasn't born then. But yeah, had an amazing weekend. Didn't do a huge amount of reading, if I'm being completely honest. We got the train down to London from where we live, just outside Edinburgh, and it took about 5 hours each way, so I was just like, yes, I'm going to get loads of reading done. Took Kairos by Jenny Erpenbeck with me, and I took my iPad with me so I could read The Imposium, but I didn't really read anything on the way down. I started reading Kairos and got about 30 pages through. I was really enjoying it, but I just got too travel sick to read it. I tend to be okay on the train, but we were in a seat that, like, the window wasn't quite a window, like you could see out, but it was mostly just like a grey wall next to me, so and the train was really crowded as well, so like I felt like when I had my head down I didn't have my bearings, and that makes me feel travel sick. I get travel sick in the car all the time, whether I'm reading or not, so I decided that I wasn't gonna chance being sick on a busy train on a Saturday morning, so I put my audiobook on. I'm listening to Bitter Thorn by Kat Dunn, which I'm really enjoying, but that's not going to be part of this vlog because it's not translated. So yeah, I listened to a bit of that and listened to a bit of music on the way down. That was it. While we were in London, I also didn't do that much reading. I sat in a cafe and read for a bit, but mostly we were just like wandering around and going to like cute markets, and then we had the festival, and I was just really tired. I was really tired on the way home. I didn't even, like, I listened to a bit of music, listened to my book, and then I was just like lying staring into the abyss on the way back. It was really tiring. The train was packed, it's full of screaming kids, and for once it wasn't my screaming child, but it's still just, it was just an awful journey on the way back. I hated it. So I haven't got much reading done. And then my husband also bought a Steam Deck, which I have sort of taken over. I've started playing Lemon Cake and I'm obsessed with it, so I haven't really got a lot of reading done because I'm just in a proper hyper focus playing Lemon Cake. So yeah, it's not been that productive for reading. I finished A Magical Girl Retires by Park So-yeon, and this is translated from Korean by Anton He. This is I think it's kind of inspired by like anime and manga. It's very reminiscent of like Sailor Moon, I would say. We're following a young girl. I say like young girl, she's like just shy of 30, who loses her job during the pandemic, and at the start of the novel we see her kind of standing on a bridge trying to muster up the courage to jump off it, because she's trying to end her life because of the debt she's accrued just from like being alive. Like, she hasn't been like spending like crazy money. It's just like, oh well, I had to replace my fridge, and then that mounted up, and then I had to replace this, and then that mounted up, and I haven't got any money coming in. And it's a really, like, she's reflecting on it being like such a small amount of money. I think it ended up being like a couple of £1,000, so like in the grand scheme of things, like a tiny amount of money to want to end your life over, but like to her it's just like completely insurmountable debt, and she's just not going to be able to repay that, and she doesn't see any other way out. It's just like a real commentary on poverty and just how difficult it can be when you are struggling for money, and just such a small sum of money becomes something so like a problem that you just cannot tackle, and so that's sort of the only way out for you. So it touches on some quite dark themes. It also touches on climate change quite a bit, and just the way women are treated in society. And this girl, she is approached on the bridge by another girl who sort of takes her away and is just like, you are destined to become a magical girl. You're the magical girl of time. You're one of the most powerful magical girls in the world basically, and introduces her to this world of magical girls where they have a union and this kind of society of magical girls, and their union represents a sort of utopia outside of like the bounds of like the traditionally like capitalistic society that we're in at the moment. It talks a lot about climate change. It talks about there is another magical girl in this who uses her power for bad things, and it's kind of talking about like the perils of power dynamics within society, and like some people having a lot more power than others, and like people aren't necessarily using that power for good. The way I'm describing it seems kind of cliche, and honestly that's exactly like what I got from it. It talks a lot about like sort of important themes, I guess, but I just didn't feel like it went into any detail really. The writing, I don't want to comment too much on the writing. I found the writing quite basic, but I think it's kind of, I don't know a lot about like manga and anime. It's just not necessarily my thing really. But I think it's supposed to be like a novelized form of like a manga. That's certainly how it read to me. That's the kind of aesthetic that I got from it. It has little images at the start of every chapter, and that was the vibe that I got from it. So I found the writing quite simplistic and didn't necessarily enjoy reading it in that form, and I think maybe it would have been better as a manga perhaps. And yeah, I just wanted a lot more from it. I feel like the themes it discussed, it just kind of mentioned these themes as like, oh, capitalism is bad, climate change is bad, the lasting impact of the pandemic is bad, and it's just like all things we know, and it doesn't really delve any further than that. I just found it quite cute. I liked the idea of the union, like I said, representing this kind of like utopian escape. I thought it was sweet, and it was quite a hopeful read, but yeah, it wasn't a new favourite. I don't think it's one that will stick with me, unfortunately. So I might do an update for because we've still got a couple of days before the end of the month. I might still read a little bit more. I might finish a book between now and then, I'm not sure. So if I finish anything else or make sort of significant progress in any of the other books that I'm reading, I will yeah, update you here. Actually, while I'm here, do you want to see a little haul of the things I bought in London? Because there were a few. We went to quite a few bookshops and just browsed around like the Brick Lane area. I got this jumper from the market stall in Brick Lane. It's not the best quality, it's already snagged, as you can see there. It's also not the best fit for me. It's like a one size, but it's meant for people who are like a little bit shorter than I am, and a little bit less booby than I am, but it's still very comfy and I think it looks nice. It's just like, that's my colour. My husband saw it and was just like, you're gonna get that jumper, aren't you? And it's like, yeah, I'm gonna get it. It is really cozy, so I'm quite glad I bought it, but I think £30 for a jumper that's obviously not very well made and not amazing quality is pretty scandalous, but I just couldn't leave it. And while we were along Brick Lane, I found a little store that was selling hair clips, so I bought 3. There's this little froggy, he's my favourite one. I was wearing him before. I got a little strawberry, that's not focusing at all. I got a little strawberry because of course I did, and my husband picked out that one for me, which is a little octopus. Yeah, they're really cute. I've been wearing the little froggy quite a lot, and I think it looks pretty bad, but yeah, I really like it. It's so cute. I also got some books. The first one I got from the Brick Lane bookshop, which is Frankenstein. This is just a Wordsworth classic of this book. I've already read this before. It was only £3.99, and I'm going to Switzerland next month, and a lot of this is set in Switzerland, and I would really like to reread it. So yeah, maybe I'll take that one with me. Yeah, that's not the most exciting purchase, but it was there, so I got it. We went to the Common Press bookshop, I think it's called, just off Brick Lane, and it's one of the best bookshops I've ever been to. It's a queer focused intersectional bookshop. They've got such an amazing selection. It's not the biggest bookshop ever. I was talking to my husband about it and he was just like, oh, their sci-fi collection isn't very big, but it's one of the best curated ones I've ever seen. And I felt that way about the kids section. That was my favourite part of the whole shop. I could have spent thousands of pounds on kids books. It was just amazing. I settled for The Woodcutter and The Snow Prince. I'd never even heard of this, but it was just so beautifully illustrated. The images are just so gorgeous. I have no idea what this is about really. I don't think I even read it. I just saw the illustrations and was like, I'm gonna get it. It says, every Christmas Eve, a lonely woodcutter named Kai carves statues for anyone who might pass by. Then one magical night, his loneliness is soothed by a visit from the much-feared Snow Prince. Kai sees hope in the prince's eyes, but as everything freezes and the prince is imprisoned in a palace of ice, can Kai break the curse? So I will, enjoy reading that around Christmas time. And the final book I bought was a book for my son, and that is called Talking Is Not My Thing. And this is from the point of view of an autistic child who is non-verbal. And it's like an exploration of how this child communicates, not using words. My son is non-verbal, so I thought this would be really nice for him to read with me. And the illustrations are really cute. I really like the colour palette. I assume that this is written by an autistic or at least neurodivergent author. I'm not sure, but it seems like at least it's positive representation of autism. So yeah, really excited to read that to my son.